Okay, hello class, welcome back to another lecture on planning research methodology, planning research methods, and we'll be talking about, we talked about in the last lectures, some different introduction and fundamentals of research, and when we began talking about scientific inquiry of the scientific method. So if anyone wants to revise what does it mean by the scientific method? Or what are the steps or processes involved which can be regarded as a scientific method? Anyone? Okay, in the last lecture also we talked about hypothesis also. Anyone who care to explain or guess what does it mean by the word hypothesis? Uh, yes, Samad?
सर लास्ट लेक्चर में हमने सबसे पहले साइंटिफिक मेथड के बारे में डिस्कस किया था कि हमें बताया था कि किसी भी इस चीज़ को हम साइंस के उसमें रखेंगे जो कि एक्सपेरिमेंटली हम उसको उसके एक्सपेरिमेंट कर सकें उसको प्रूव कर सकें।
Okay.
हाइपोथेसिस के बारे में हमने डिस्कस किया था। हाइपोथेसिस के बारे में डिस्कस किया था कि एक जनरल स्टेटमेंट है जिसको हम टेस्ट करते हैं उसमें या फिर हम राइट प्रूव करने की।
Okay. Okay. Yes, Rida?
सर बस मैंने भी वही बात करनी थी, वो समझ ने कर दी है सेम।
Okay. Okay, great. So, okay. And what is hypothesis? What does it mean by hypothesis?
सर मैं आई
Yes, yes, please, Rida.
सर हाइपोथेसिस में हम लोग लाइक इफ एंड देन सिचुएशन देखते हैं। दो जो वेरिएबल्स हैं उनका आपस में रिलेशन के अगर इस चीज में मतलब लाइक देयर आर टू वेरिएबल्स एक्स एंड वाई, हाउ एक्स इन्फ्लुएंस वाई, तो सर ये चीज एक लाइक एक हाइपोथेसिस होती है हमारी रिसर्च में। मतलब हम किसी ना किसी चीज के बारे में बात कर रहे होते हैं तो उसमें हम कह सकते हैं कि फॉर एग्जांपल किसी भी चीज को लाइक जिस तरह मैंने सर अपना जो थीसिस किया था वो एक्सेसिबिलिटी पर था, तो सर जिस तरह मैं हम कह सकते हैं कि ट्रांसपोर्टेशन पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट ना होने की वजह से लोग प्राइवेट अपनी व्हीकल्स पर इतना ज्यादा सफर करते हैं, तो सर मतलब इस तरह से हम कोई भी हाइपोथेसिस बना सकते हैं।
Okay, good, good. Yes, Rizwan, please.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर। सर कोई भी ऐसी चीज लाइक जो लॉजिकल हो और व्हिच कैन बी टेस्टेड भी।
Yes, precisely. Any statement, like Rida said, any x or y variable, as well as any statement which is testable, which can be tested, which can be experimented on, and in which we can help us in finding out whether that statement is true or false. Okay, so we'll start with the word of operationalizing research now. Now like for example in your research you have revisited a lot of journals, you have selected your topic, and now you actually want to start the research. Now the word comes operationalizing. That actually how will you conduct this research? So before that you need to know about the hypothesis. So your operationalizing depends upon the hypothesis which you have developed, which will be tested. So let's talk with some different ways to how do we talk in the research when you're doing a research, how to develop some kind of hypothesis. So hypothesis is an idea that can be tested through experimentation and observation. So of course, developing a hypothesis, it will, depending upon your own reading of literature or how much knowledge you have, that would help you define the hypothesis. And once you have defined the hypothesis, that will directly contribute towards uh, uh, developing your objective. And then kindly unmute yourself. There is a distortion. Okay. Yeah. So hypothesis is basically based on your hypothesis, you will develop your objectives, and based on your hypothesis or objectives, your methodology will be defined. So hypothesis it is a very integral part of your research. So you must focus on development of hypothesis in a clear manner, which can easily tested or can easily be experimented. Experimentation can be done on it. So it is a single assertion. You are trying to prove something. You are emphasizing on some certain thing. It is a proposed explanation of something about something which is based on available knowledge or something which needs to be explained. So an existing knowledge, maybe you are adding something to it, or you're trying to explain something which is any phenomena what is happening in the world. So that is you are basically making a claim, a kind of a claim that this is happening because of this. So that is a claim that you are going to putting forth, and that will be then tested. Okay. So hypothesis when you are developing hypothesis, it will have depending upon the problem or the situation which you are going to be focusing on, your research hypothesis will help you operationalize the research, like define your objectives, and based on objective you need to know what kind of data you need to collect, how to analyze this data, which test to perform, which will give direct answer to the hypothesis which you have developed. So hypothesis has a very close linkages with objectives. Sometimes people use it like alternatively to each other, that it can be people say hypothesis can be directly linked to your objectives. So there were very different approaches, and some students they use their own techniques to develop hypotheses. Maybe their own understanding, maybe some discussion with your colleagues or your teachers or advisors, or sometimes just reading about certain uh, things, or sometimes even just observing what is happening, or maybe with some past experiences. So every student has different approach to develop their hypothesis. So some initial ideas are always there. Students have a lot of ideas in their minds. So they throw them around. They try to link those ideas. Maybe go to the root cause of different problems. So you're playing with different ideas, some different concepts, which has continuously being introduced in the scientific literature. So maybe there are a lot of ideas laying around in your mind, which helps you develop the hypothesis. So maybe you can go for just testing that idea. You just start making to know about this observation, your ideas. You start making observations, or maybe you can go and start looking for the literature which has already tried to explain that your idea. Okay, and based on these two approaches, you need to develop your own problem statement. So that will help you define that this is a phenomena or a problem you want to be researching on, and this is the operational definition. So operational definition means that, for example, I'm using the word resilience, for example, the word resilience. Now, the word resilience, it is a very multi-dimensional, multifaceted phenomena. So in which context, in which approach you will be using to justify or define resilience, the word resilience. So I'm saying, okay, resilience is basically something, an ability of a system to bounce back. So there are different definitions are out there. So, but now you are thinking of measuring resilience for, let's say, climate change communities. So now you are now operationalizing or contextualizing the concept of resilience depending on the different phenomena. So you are taking resilience now as a capacity indicator. So you have operationalized the definition of resilience. A resilience for an from environmentalist, resilience means maybe something which is existing in the environment. For a civil engineer, resilience mean maybe structural integrity of a building. So for us, for a planner or let's say a disaster manager or a climate change expert, from that point of view, you are operationalizing resilience as a capacity indicator to increase or enhance the capabilities of the exposed communities. So this is what is meant by operationalizing different concepts. I hope you got this point. Anyone who did not get the point of operationalizing, or maybe I will invite someone if you want to operationalize any concept which is a very broad concept like sustainability. It's a very broad thing. What does it mean by sustainability to someone? And some of you will maybe define it differently, and some of you will define differently. So even different disciplines, for example, they define the word sustainability differently. Maybe your past experiences made you define sustainability different. Maybe your even if you're in the same discipline, maybe the literature you read are from two different authors, two different who employ different kind of approaches to understand the word of sustainability. So how your research, current research you are going to be undertaking, which definition you are going to be using to let's say start research on your project. So now I will invite any one of you if you want to give an example of a very broad concept and which means differently to different let's say professions. For let's I don't know if I've talked about in the class. So what is it? I've used the word infrastructure. So maybe some civil engineer. What does it mean by civil infrastructure? If I talk about that, we'll be reading today about infrastructure. So civil engineers, what do you think we'll be reading about now? Civil engineers. Yes, Usman, please.
Sir, bridges वगैरह, roads वगैरह, buildings.
Okay. Okay. So you think we'll be talking about okay planners. If I say that today we'll be talking about infrastructure, what does it mean to you? Yes, Rida.
सर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में हम लोग रोड्स को तो लाते ही हैं, उसके अलावा जो सारी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चरल सर्विसेज होती हैं सर, लाइक वाटर सप्लाई और ये सारी सर, इनको हम सीवरेज सिस्टम हो गया, तो इन सबको हम इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में काउंट करते हैं.
Yes, Samad, please.
सर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के अंदर कोई भी फिजिकल चीज सर जो अटैच्ड हो डेवलपमेंट.
Okay, great. Yes. So now the word is the technical all definitions are correct. All of these definitions or all of your approaches are correct. But yes, Taha, you want to add something?
जी सर वही बस है जो रिदा ने रिपीट किया, मैं उसी को सेकंड कर रहा था.
Okay, great. So now what is when you're going to be doing a research, your research is going to be read by a lot of different professionals, because in scientific literature, the same paper is read by different people, with different disciplines and backgrounds. So they need to be made aware in the start of your research that the word which you are saying, what does it mean? What is the operational definition of that term, that terminology? That is called operational definition. So you need to finalize that this is the meaning which according to my own understanding, this is the definition of this concept, and this concept I'm taking forward now. So you're based on that, now you will go and formulate your hypothesis. So these things are very clear: statement of problem and operational definitions. Without that, you cannot develop your research hypothesis. For example, Rizwan was saying infrastructure is meant by, let's suppose I'm talking about bridges. Rizwan says that due to a high number of high velocity of let's say water velocity is very high during the monsoon season or the flooding season, the infrastructure on the river is getting damaged. Now this is a statement, this is hypothesis, this is, let's say this is a hypothesis and you want to test it. Unless and until you tell that what does Rizwan mean by infrastructure, that he's talking about bridges, other people will open the paper and they say, okay, maybe he's talking about some water sewerage in flooding situation, in monsoon flooding, but that is not the way. So it is contextualized differently. So that is another way of observing operational definition. It is very important, specifically in social sciences, in which there are a lot, certain words have a lot of meaning, certain concepts or phenomena. It has a lot of understandings, conceptual understanding, sometimes different theoretical understandings, sometimes even giving you different kind of, I would say, frameworks and different methodologies. Depending upon the meaning of the word, your methodologies will be changed. So that is a very important part to understand. So that is developing your hypothesis. Okay. So there are different hypotheses out there. Like, can that be in experimental hypothesis, you are usually making some kind of simulations, and that is experimental hypothesis. Then is another is null hypothesis, that which cannot be directly measured but can be statistically or verified through different means. So they are different based on different, I would say, your research approaches. Your null these hypotheses or type of hypothesis will vary, and usually in our in social sciences we usually use this null hypothesis. So more on that details in the coming lectures. So these are some different type of hypotheses. You don't need to learn it, but there are some different types out there. So there's a statement, who's a good boy. So can it be tested? Okay. So if there is a methodology to test, you test it and you say, yes, that is correct. So hypotheses are basically a statement which can be tested and can be verified. Yes, Samad, please.
Sir, actually, I'm a bit confused about the terms assumption and hypothesis. So what's the main difference between the two?
Okay, assumption and hypothesis. Very good point. Okay, assumption is like, I would say, like considering some factors or assuming that this is the current scenario. For example, okay, I'm talking about, I'm asking about, I'm measuring happiness, for example. I'm measuring happiness of the class, or the feedback of the class. So if I assume that all of students are honest, that is the assumption. And hypothesis is that Dr. Irfan is a very good teacher. So how can it be verified? By verifying the feedback given by the students. But my assumption over there is that students are honest. So it's kind of added control variable, which you assume that this is what might happen. This is the current condition. We are making some kind of consistent, taking some constant, and just assuming that this is constant. Then you're going to be hypothesizing it. So assumption is by I would say literal meaning might overlap with the term hypothesis, but in research, assumption is something quite different, and hypothesis is different. Somebody got my point? Yes, Hamza, please. You want to add something?
सर
Yes, sir. Thank you.
एक हाइपोथेसिस में कब हम अलाउड है कि हम assumption ले सकते हैं?
Well, the point is that most of your hypotheses, they have built-in assumptions. When you're hypothesizing something, you're also assuming many different things. Like, for example, feedback. You're also assuming that, let's say, students are honest. One other assumption is that that students have not checked their marks, exam marks, or people have not yet interacted, or the teacher has not evaluated and given them marks. That's another assumption or control variable. We say, okay, we can have the feedback before the paper or after the paper. So that hypothesis and assumption, they also go side by side. When you're hypothesizing something, you're also assuming that this might happen, this might happen. But hypothesis is a straightforward sentence, which is going to be experimented. Assumption will not be tested. Your assumption is constant. You are not testing the assumption. You are testing the statement. That testing statement is the hypothesis. What, Hamza, you clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, now there is a question that yes, using fertilizer can enhance your plant production. So is this statement testable? Yes, Azwan?
तो डेफिनेटली हम कर सकते हैं, हम इसका एक्सपेरिमेंट इस तरह कर सकते हैं कि लाइक प्लांट्स को फर्टिलाइजर, जो भी हमारी प्लांट्स हम प्रोडक्शन कर रहे हैं, फ्रूट्स या वेजिटेबल्स की तरफ जाना चाहते हैं, तो उसकी एक हम लोग पहले विदाउट फर्टिलाइजर की हम लोग उसकी प्रोडक्शन देखें और एक विद फर्टिलाइजर देखें, तो इससे शायद हम लोग को वही आ जाएगा, रिजल्ट आ जाएगा कि फर्टिलाइजर इंक्रीजेस द प्रोडक्शन.
Yes. So my main point here in this slide was basically, now only one statement has made Rizwan think how he can define his methodology, how he can approach his research methodology. Some students always come to me that, sir, I'm not sure how to develop my research methodology. You have to revisit your hypothesis. Just by making some kind of statement, this hypothesis, it can help you visualize what sort of research instruments you need to test this statement. So hypothesis directly impacts your research methodology. That was the main point I wanted to say. Thank you, Rizwan, for helping. Okay, then there are some common hypotheses which cannot be tested. So some statements I'll give you. If you're conceptually clear, then you might be able to say that, okay, this statement testable or not. We'll go into that later. Okay. So how you're going to be understanding a hypothesis that if your results are matching with the hypothesis, it's good. If it's not, your hypothesis is false. But of course, for example, if I go back, yes. So this statement, exposure to fertilizer increases production of plants. For example, its statement is out there and you tested it and you found out that no, the exposure to fertilizer does not increase the production of plants. Now, next question a reviewer or your teacher will have, what type of plant are we talking about? Okay, so now what you're going, now you're refining your hypothesis. You're changing your hypothesis. Maybe fertilizer helps you production of certain plants, but this type of fertilizer, this also now I'm going to type of fertilizer, which quantity of that fertilizer, does it enhance your production or not? Now we are going, I'm revising it and I'm refining the hypothesis. And maybe after some time I say, okay, exposure of this type of fertilizer of this much quantity does not increase the production of this kind of plant in this type of atmosphere in this kind of location. Now you test it. Now I've made it kind of a negative statement, like exposure to fertilizer does not increase production of plants. So now your hypothesis, because I put the word not in it, your hypothesis is now true. So now you have created a knowledge. You created something new that, okay, this type of fertilizer is not useful for this type of plant. Like if you're talking about plants, let's talk about medicine. A lot of medicines are out there, but certain medicine have impact on the illness and certain does not. Like vaccine, let's talk about vaccine, COVID vaccine. So certain vaccine will have impact, certain vaccine might not have an impact. Now that is, you are creating knowledge, you are creating new science, you are giving option and alternatives, and you are removing the alternatives now. So you are contributing to some way or one way or another. So hypothesis is, again coming back, hypothesis is very important to begin with. Okay. A good hypothesis, some of the characteristics of hypothesis, it must be testable, and it can be false, like it can be falsified as well. Okay. So hypotheses need to add something to the current knowledge. That is another another point. So some hypotheses can be drafted like that if I do this, then this will happen. Okay, so you're hypothesizing, you're not actually doing it, you're just thinking, or your idea in your mind that this will happen if you do this. So you're creating hypothesis. cause and effect is coming. Okay, let's talk about good hypothesis. Brushing every day will reduce your chances cavities develop in your teeth. UV ultraviolet radiation can cause skin irritation and burns. Okay, that is hypothesis which can be tested. What is untestable hypothesis? Vague statements. Like, so it's untestable hypothesis is there, but testing it will be, I mean, it will be very subjective, very unrealistic, and like you're just kind of a pseudoscience you're making, but it cannot be tested. Like, yes, Ahmed, please.
सर ये क्यों टेस्ट नहीं हो सकते सर, मतलब सर मेरे हिसाब से तो सर ये जो तीनों स्टेटमेंट जो अनटेस्टेबल हैं सर, इन पे हम टेस्टिंग कर सकते हैं सर.
ओके, मुझे तीसरी वाली स्टेटमेंट में बताएं कैसे टेस्ट करेंगे.
सर जो सर अभी एस्ट्रोनॉमी में सर डिफरेंट यूनिवर्सेस दरियाफ्त तो हो चुकी हैं सर, के जो मतलब हमारे से डिफरेंट लाइट ईयर्स दूर हैं, और सर मतलब और सर अभी जहाँ तक मुझे मेरा नॉलेज है तो साइंस अभी तक ये बता रही है कि जो यूनिवर्स का साइज है सर वो एवर एक्सपेंडिंग है. इसकी कोई अभी साइंस एंड तक नहीं पहुंच सकी कि यहाँ जाके यूनिवर्स का एंड हो जाता है. तो सर कुछ भी पॉसिबल है कि सर हो सकता है सर हम सर मैंने एक डॉक्यूमेंट्री में देखा कि वो कहते हैं कि मतलब हो सकता है सर हम मतलब एक स्मॉल ड्रॉप हो एक बड़े समुंदर का, मतलब जो ओवरऑल यूनिवर्स के बारे में वो ये कह रहे होते हैं कि ये जो हम जितनी यूनिवर्स हम फाइंड कर चुके हैं माइट बी पॉसिबल ये सिंगल ड्रॉप है एक पूरे सी का. तो सर इस लिहाज से सर मतलब कि कुछ भी साइंटिफिकली मतलब हम इसको रैशनलाइज कर सकते हैं कि लार्ज यूनिवर्स कैसे, मतलब कोई अगर ये स्टेटमेंट रखे तो सर टेस्टिंग तो हो सकती है.
ओके, जो आप बात कर रहे हैं ना, इसको मैं भी अक्सर यही बात करता हूँ, इसको कहते हैं हम इसको इसी वर्ड्स को यूज करते हैं, सूडो साइंस का वर्ड यूज करते हैं लोग. द पॉइंट इज something which is according to the statement, we cannot contact that universe, and if we cannot do that, how are we going to be testing it? How can we do that? Okay, and there's certain things about quantifying the morality or ethics. It is very ambiguous, very different, like it will vary in your Eastern culture and Western culture. So this kind of statement cannot be like, this is such a generic statement that cannot be tested unless and until you're going to be like contextualizing what does it mean by morality, how do you define morality, how are you going to measure it. There is no way to measure it. Okay, so everyone has their own standards or ethics standards, so that is quite different. Which you are going to be saying, you're saying that something data which cannot be collected about certain things which cannot be collected, if that data cannot be collected, how can it be analyzed? For that purpose, this is for that the true meaning is that will remain as an idea, as a theory, okay, which cannot be proven. So it is statement, just a statement over there. So something which is not observable cannot be verified. Yes, Ahmed, please.
सर आपकी जो आपने बात की कि जो फर्स्ट पॉइंट है सर इस पे भी एक्सपेरिमेंट है सर. सर जिस तरह डिफरेंट साइकोलॉजिकल एक्सपेरिमेंट्स कंडक्ट किए जाते हैं कि सर दो डिफरेंट ग्रुप्स को सेम जो सिचुएशन में टेस्ट किया जाता है कि कैसे रिस्पॉन्स करते हैं सर, तो किसी ना किसी हद तक किसी स्पेसिफिक मॉरल वैल्यू के ऊपर डिफरेंट लोगों का हम किसी ना किसी हद तक जो है वो मोरालिटी फाइंड आउट कर सकते हैं कि इवन मैन या वुमेन रिस्पॉन्स कैसा करते हैं सर उस सिचुएशन में.
The point is, Ahmed, the debate which you're talking about, I can talk about it all day. So let's stop it here. But yes, you're a valid point, and we can have a discussion on that to some extent. How we going to be quantify it, or how it is very difficult to quantify it. So there is a lot of arguments there. So let's not go on to that. I'll move on with the lecture. Any other questions, students? Or if you agree with me or you disagree with that's fine. Please point out. And I'm happy that Ahmed Arif raised this question. It's good to argue. Anyone else? Okay. Then is how are you going to be? Yes, Sharana, please.
सर मैं थोड़ा कंफ्यूज था, अहमद आरिफ को सपोर्ट करूंगा मैं इस बात पे कि मॉरलिटी सर टेस्ट हो सकती है। जैसे अक्सर हम देखते हैं कि लोग प्रैंक्स करते हैं, सोशल एक्सपेरिमेंट्स करते हैं, जैसे वॉलेट गिरा दिया सड़क पे और देखते हैं कि कौन उठाएगा कौन नहीं उठाएगा। मतलब हम इस तरह टेस्ट कर सकते हैं कि यार एक स्पेसिफिक रीजन के अंदर कितने लोग जो उनसे वॉलेट उठाएंगे, कितने उसका रिटर्न परस्यू करेंगे। इस तरह करके हम क्वांटिफाई करके सर कुछ ना कुछ आइडिया तो लगा सकते हैं। क्या ख्याल है?
Okay, Sharana, if you want to go into the debate, then okay, let's open the debate. Morality, ethics, and this is very subjective, and that has remained subjective. For building a theory or for building prediction models in science, that you dropped a wallet, you talked about that you dropped a wallet on the road and you observe that will the people pick it up or give it back to the person or not. Does it really help you in predicting the behavior of another individual? Like Sher Alam has returned the wallet back, but making repeated observations, like maybe Rizwan also returned, maybe Shahriyar also returned, Hamza also returned, but does it guarantee that Samad will return it? So that your hypothesis is meaningless. It does not give you a really answer to anything.
Sir, I was just talking about the level of morality in a specific region. Let's suppose that in region A, 20 out of 15 people returned the wallet. Then in region B, 10 returned it. Like all the cultural values, the religious values that enforce the behavior of people residing in the both regions, it can be tested the level of morality in the both regions. I'm not talking on an individual scale, but on a collective scale.
Okay. Okay. Again, Sharalam, the thing is that you cannot quantify morality. What is good for one person is bad for another person. Which you think is right, another person thinks it's wrong. That is moral values. That's vary between Western, Eastern, everything. It varies a lot. So much variations are there. Past experiences, income, age, education. There are so many unknown variables at play that you cannot quantify morality. So if for that literature, go and read the works of Kant. Go and read the word of philosophers who have developed different philosophies regarding morality and ethics. Like depending upon your past experiences, you are right, the other person is wrong. So it's again a fruitless, I would say, discussion on this domain. So the hypothesis, which can be made, but it cannot be tested, which cannot be fully tested, at least. Clear, Shararam?
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay. We can have a lot of more debate, and I don't want to go into this German philosophers who have talked about like I think, therefore I am, and there are so many different philosophers. We will go very much off topic, but you are right. We can have arguments on that, but for science, this is untestable as of yet.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Okay. Moving on. We're talking about. Okay. So now hypothesis also tells us that what is the relationship between different variables x and y, like Rida mentioned, that we need some kind of variable which need to be correlate, maybe do some kind of analysis on that. So we need some readings or samples out there. So any way to link those or any way to disprove this? You cannot either prove it, you cannot either disprove it. So that also gives you an idea that is your hypothesis correct? Is your experiment safe and considered ethical according to science? You're not replicating it, you're not harming an individual, you're not violating the confidentiality agreements between the respondents or participants. Is it safe? Will this result replicated, or will this identity of the participants shown to the rest, so that it's unethical? So that also helps you decide that is your hypothesis right or not. And yes, another way, your hypothesis should be simple as possible. It should be as straightforward as possible. So you can just rewrite same hypothesis in different meanings, but choose one which is very simple. Does it focus on something that you can actually test? A lot of discussion on that. Can be violating ethical standards. Okay. Good and bad. Okay. Talking about ice cream. Okay, it's much faster than ice. Yes, it can be tested. Right. So yes, good. Pepsi is better than Coca-Cola. Now everyone has their own preference. So that statement hypothesis is bad. It cannot be verified. Majority we can say to some extent, but that means the majority of people like Pepsi better than Coca-Cola. So that is a good hypothesis. But Pepsi is better than Coca-Cola. That is a very poor or bad hypothesis. Plants will improve better with this fertilizer. A lot of statements are being done. Okay, sorry. A lot of statement is already then that this, if you do this plants will be better. But actual statement should be plants will go better with this fertilizer as compared to no fertilizer. So that is the correct way to write hypothesis. Do not be so much vague that plants will improve better with the fertilizer. Like Rizwan said last time that okay, we will take some example that there is a plant which will have no fertilizers and one plant which will have a fertilizer. So now a plants will grow better fertilizer than no fertilizer. That is something testable, which can be compared, which can be hypothesized, can be worked upon. So your not hypothesis should be clear, which can be tested. Okay. Now another way is how become the hypothesis become the theory. Right. So after repeated hypotheses, repeated observations, you get the same results again and again and again. And your test does not prove hypothesis. Maybe that hypothesis can then be turned into theory. Then theory can help you explain different phenomena. Okay. Then is let's talk about that hypothesis. How about two different X and Y? We are going to be linking X and Y. Like if this happen, then that will happen. So now X and Y variables are there, and we need to know how those indicators can be measured and how can be they interrelated with each other. Now measuring anything, it can be some numeric, it can be some kind of a scale, it can be some kind of a frequency, a repetition of certain phenomena happening again and again. So that gives you some kind type of measurement of each indicator. And those X and Y, the main indicators, maybe you will break an X and Y, maybe you will make some more assumptions. But X and Y, they are so, because they are the main indicators which help you verify the hypothesis. Those indicators are called conceptual indicators. Okay, again, another way of describing hypothesis should be conceptually clear. Must be yes, Rizwan, please.
Sir, kindly repeat कर दें conceptual वाला.
Okay, to prove certain hypotheses, like if X, okay, I'll give you an example. Let me think about it. Okay, my hypothesis is Rizwan works on study. Okay, Rizwan studies 5 hours daily will improve his grade. If you study 5 hours daily, you will improve your GPA. Okay, this is my hypothesis. So number one is X and Y, right? One is affecting other. X dependent and independent variable. Okay, so your independent variable is your number of studies, number of hours you study. That is indicator X, and another is Y, your GPA. So two indicators, study hours and GPA. That is your conceptual indicators, which are very important because they are essential to measure your hypothesis. So they are called conceptual indicators, important indicators kind of. Okay, another way of describing hypothesis should be clear, specific, should be related to some kind of maybe theory or not, and should have an empirical reference. Like sometimes creating a new hypothesis has become a bit of a very difficult nowadays in science. So what we do, we relate our theory, we relate our hypothesis with some kind of theory or a phenomena. Like if we're talking about, let's say, improving the environment. So improving the environment in the main theory, it will link directly to your sustainability context. So main theory is already there. So maybe you link your hypothesis to some kind of already established theory or a phenomena. Second, another is that it should have an empirical reference, like maybe certain, by empirical, what does it mean by empirical? Empirical study is basically a study which is conducted on ground. Okay, so that is empirical, something empirical evidence, empirical study, empirical research. You might use or see the word empirical again and again. So empirical reference is there. So your hypothesis can have like a link to the actual study which is conducted on the ground. Okay, so I think if you don't have the question, I'll stop the recording. I'll like to take a break. Any questions, students? Yes, Sharia.
सर मैंने ये पूछना था कि जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का रिसर्च मेथड होता है जैसे सैमसंग या एप्पल का, वो एकेडमिक रिसर्च मेथड से किस तरह वो डिफर करता है?
Okay, yes, very good point. So those are called case studies. If you heard about in your friend from management sciences, they use the word case study. This was the problem and this is how it was handled, and this is one way of let's say resolving this problem. Okay, that is a case study, but that case study is not applicable to rest of the organizations as well. So that case studies differ a lot, but generalizing that that this case study will be applicable to all of it, if it is true, that case studies, if it is applicable to all of them, then that study is now can be an academic study or academic research. You sure you got my point?
यस सर, और सर इसके अलावा ये पूछना था कि अगर कोई इस तरह का ब्रेक थ्रू या रिसर्च होती है जो कि ह्यूमैनिटी के लिए ओवरऑल बहुत बेनिफिशियल होती है, जैसे कोई फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनी जो है वो कैंसर का क्योर या इस तरह की कोई चीज निकाल देती है, तो वो किसी किस्म की ऑब्लिगेशन के अंडर होती है अपनी रिसर्च वगैरह को बाकी सारों के लिए, मतलब वो फाइंडिंग्स को डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करने के लिए?
Okay, good point, Shariat. Let's talk about the vaccine like that. So no one disclosed the actual formulation or the genetic code of the vaccine, but they tested the vaccine on a sample population and they published the findings. The people, we call it that trials are happening, right? These trials are happening, these trials are happening. So that trials are research, they are published, and without publishing your trials or publication your data, that pharmaceutical or that let's say medicine or a vaccine might not be approved for the public use. unless and until all the research clinical trials are published on paper, this research paper as if they're published. So okay, and defining upon the will the pharmaceutical, do they disclose or do they not? I think that then goes into proprietary rights and patents game, and that is a whole another debate of how to go into patents and how to have a proprietary rights about certain things. So Shariari, I hope you understand my point.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Oh, class, thank you very much. I'll stop the recording now.